Right. Thank you and everyone for joining the IOV Foundation New York, episode 183, AI and Robotics, the DLT Renaissance. Thank you guys and everyone for joining and listen and who comes and listens to this information in the future. I hope you guys find it as valuable as I know I do every single day. The diverse amount of mindsets and perspectives that I get to have in this space and that join us and share their information. Devon Shellfish Cookie, thank you very much for joining so quickly. I'm gonna give the space a little bit of a retweet. We'll see if we can get some more people in here. Give it a couple minutes or so, and feel free to jump in the conversation. Oh, Devon.
It's just amazing to see Cookie in here. I never would thought I would see Cookie, especially so early on.
Why is that, Devon?
I just never see him. Let's retweet the space though. Let's get more people in. Let's have a great conversation. The DLT Renaissance.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was doing just as such as you had spoken about. The DLT Renaissance, AI and robotics. The DLT Renaissance, right? The the apparatus in which is the combination of AI and robotics and what that leads to, I think, is part of the DLT renaissance. And I think distributed ledger technology is already starting to play an interesting role when it comes to, you know, just the fact of being able to have authentication behind the source of the information, and even of course furthermore on being able to execute different types of um, logic flows, right? That can also have that same kind of executable proof of where that source was, and leading to my thought of where that makes what that makes. Uh, so significant of a pair is AI, of course, large language models for the most part. Really, I'm speaking about have a distinct nature, of course, today existing as typically privatized systems, and I think distributed ledger technology is really awesomely um, positioned to be that pairing in which that proof of source of logic flow from a large language model that exists, from a large language model that might be executing a transaction that's existing onto another application that has to then source whatever that logic flow into a robotics physical transaction, that's automated, and all of these different interoperable systems that could be executed based off of this logic flow. I think distributed ledger technology, in particular the XRP ledger, uh, offers a really unique opportunity for these different developments to kind of take place together. Of course, stablecoins being a huge part in that as well.
That is a lot to unpack. That is a lot to unpack.
Go ahead and take it slow. I'll I'll send some
So,
invites out, see if we'll get some people up.
so
And sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say. So this is kind of fun because this is I can merge this as into a continuation to the conversation that we had earlier, right? Let's talk about the stablecoin aspect. You say that stable coins will be kind of, and I'm just generalizing what you said. Stable coins would be one of the many bridges that helps facilitate DLT into the future, or the revolutionary aspect of what DLT can become in the future, right? Is that a fair question?
Yeah, and if I could, I'm going to answer it with a question. When you have AI, large language models, robotics, and digital authorizing transactions, what would be their smoothest pathway if you had to look at the technologies available
Could you
today?
repeat that again? I'm sorry. If you had AI and what?
So think about large language models and robotics executing transactions, logic flow of transactions. What types of systems and technologies available today offer them the capabilities to have a smooth transaction flow set that could occur? And I don't know, my thing has made a couple
I
ding
don't know.
noises, but I'm not sure if other people are on stage.
I don't know the answer to that question to be able to have a back and forth to that one. I don't know. Are AIs actually executing transactions at scale, at large? I don't know that to be true.
Well, just think about traders today. I mean, primarily the vast amount of trades that are occurring are bots. The vast amount of information that gets transferred between sources is being done in mostly automated ways, bots, right, if you will. The more sophisticated they get, they garner or are able to garner information and execute transaction flows even on, say, others' behalfs. If I have my Tesla bot that goes to the store for me and makes a purchase at the same time I'm making a purchase online, at the same time as my robo taxi is making a purchase for gas or electrical, sorry, electrical, and electric or whatever it is to recharge itself, right? And at the same time as 30 seconds later there's somebody who's renting the service and I'm getting instant funds directly to my account, right? All of these these different things that are interoperating together themselves, systems which would look like just a simple application, yet has all of the manifolds of AI robotics interacting on distributed ledger technologies or throughout distributed ledger technologies possible to execute these transactions. Stablecoins, think about it. Stablecoins offer this digital means in which all of these transfers could occur and could occur if they needed to in means of fractional uh, limits, right? And or micro payments.
Okay, so excuse my ignorance because maybe I am just unaware, but isn't there a difference between bots and AI?
AI is a very vast term, and you know, and in my opinion, it's not. It's a misnomer in itself. I mean, artificial. I don't personally believe anything artificial. I understand the logic behind trying to create a synthetic point of view behind, you know, whatever this particular thing in operation is. Right? It wouldn't occur as normally as we would think about it in nature. It's hard to prove that if possible. But however, intelligence is also just kind of a personal perspective based off of your own relevance to the information that's being actually shared at that moment in time, and you know how well you can relate to it, and of course share in this collective observation that may be taking place.
Would a would a better question be? Is there a difference between algorithmic trading and AI trading?
Fair question as well.
Well, is there an application that is processing and executing all of the transactions for the individual?
Well, this kind of brings me back to, like, maybe I'm wrong here. I'm not a dev, so correct me if I'm wrong, but kind of reminds me of rippling, right? With the AMM, or the market makers, in the sense that it finds the path of least resistance. Is that correct or no?
Well, see, the thing would be a question of is who is executing the rippling, and in which direction and flow is that liquidity going for, perhaps for whatever instances that would occur. If you had a logic flow set that said had some sort of mathematical proportions to do so, yeah, you could think of that as, right, AI actually executing right, the nominal transactions for that to be done. Um, but is rippling itself AI? It's an interesting question, right? Because you look at like aspects of the XRP ledger today and say, yeah, I mean, there's already AI kind of already in the XRP ledger. I mean, how does it do such a great job auto bridging, right? And using XRP to create the fastest pathway right through the XRP ledger at the most nominal fee. Um, this is it's just kind of I think a little bit point of view, and also to my opinion of why AI is such like this vast term where it's like large language models, audio processing units, video editing softwares. All of these things kind of can be considered AI depending on what it's doing. Think about Grok, right? Grok is a large language model, but it also has Imagine today, which give it an image and it'll make a video out of the image.
Isn't it important for like things like the interledger protocol for AI in the sense that, like for example, when I think of AI using these these rails, if you have Waymo, a company that uses autonomous driving, they want to get compensated, so they're probably going to use one network, but then you know that network might have to communicate with another network, right? Does that sound accurate, or like the interledger protocol isn't AI itself, but it's a means for these AI networks to communicate. And dare I say, ISO 2022 compliancy is very important to write because, you know, all these different networks have to communicate. Sorry, my kid's going nuts.
Yeah, I mean, I know you threw the ISO in there for a little smiles, but if it was AIs that were executing these transactions on behalf of financial institutions, for the most part, that gets done already today. In that sense, yeah, I mean ISO 20022 as a standard would most likely be involved from international transfer standpoints for the information that would be transferred prior to the execution of a transaction that may occur. Of course, all of this could be done pretty much instantaneously. But I'm loving that you brought up ILP. I also put it in the title as well because it plays a huge role as well. You're so right, persistence. The interlaying assistance, if you will, right? The connector that allows for all of these objective systems to allow for that interoperable nature to occur takes protocols or a protocol, right? The interledger protocol. And so it doesn't matter the distributed ledger system that may be executing the proof and source of logic flow from the means of executing a transaction for a stable coin, all the way to possibly having an NFT represent information that was uploaded by a large language model, proving its source of information and reference, which could be as small as just somebody trying to write a book and have it published in this way or exist in this way so that it could be um, y- you know transferred at a later date or whatever it may be, all the way to data science, right, where you could store the data science, the information that was done in research that in a decentralized manner and way. And you have all of this system that can play into which would look like just a regular application for the everyday individual, but all of these systems underlyingly that play together, which will allow this to occur. Shellfish, go ahead. Welcome up.
Hi, thank you. Okay, so yesterday there was a link for Alter Ego, not the account, but a brain computer interface that lays over your head like a little halo. And the gentleman was speaking through his thoughts, which means there had to be an application, a system, an AI that was converting his brain signals to, like, I guess, I don't know if they had to map his brain, but to the words that he was thinking. So I would imagine that right there is tokenization of thoughts, which would have to be put on a ledger or blockchain of some sort because you don't want anybody hacking your thoughts at any time thinking, hey, he's got, I mean, the guy was only putting his to-do list in the calendar, but any little thought that you could have could go out into the ethers to be hacked through that Bluetooth device that's laying on his head, right? So it has to be secured, but you want something really fast and safe and secure. So ledger technology. Anyone?
And doesn't this whole entire thing, like you're saying about how like one word means something and everything else means something else, and then the kind of the whole debunking of the way that certain people portray certain things, for example, XRP being a part of the ISO 2000 or 222. The fact like XRP itself is not, but the company that's using that and using the ledger is. So it kind of correlates both compared to one, whereas certain people kind of bash the sense that XRP is an ISO 2022, and it's actually the company that's using that um, native token that creates it to be a part of it.
It's like all international institutions that want to interact with each other have to be ISO 20022 compliant, but they don't have to be using the XRP ledger. It just happens to be that there perhaps are
Yeah,
parties at play that are
I,
using it.
I fully see that. It's just like the debunking of XRP not being ISO 2022. It's like certain people pick like very different words that kind of mean the same thing. Whereas, like, basically, what people are trying to say is that Ripple itself and what Ripple has and them using the XRPL with them being compliant to ISO 2022 is going to increase the value of XRP. But a lot of people don't kind of cross bridge that as saying that XRP itself is ISO 2022, which it's not. So you see a lot of FUD about people saying, well, XRP itself is not ISO 2022, but we all know that Ripple, who is using XRP, is compliant. So in the end, like Ripple itself is going to use RippleNet or whatever it may use, but at the end of the day, ISO 2000 or 222 is going to benefit, or XRP is going to benefit from ISO 2022 based on the companies that are using it rather than people kind of debunking the sense that the native token itself isn't ISO compliant.
Yeah, I mean, there's no direct correlation. You could have been using XRP if you wanted with the previous standard as well, because ISO is just it's just a message. It's basically just a filler of information about what is about to occur, and the the when it's going to occur.
But yes, and I apologize for bringing up ISO. But isn't it like I find it kind of interesting that we start getting this jobs data reports coming in, as completely false, right? And I find it interesting that it kind of seems to be lining up for right around when ISO kind of went went live. Would you correlate that data being trying to get more accurate data sets to the ISO? Or am I wrong by doing that?
No, no. ISO is used for international payments transactions. What you're thinking about is like statistics, right? I think when I think about one of the crimes of the century in the sociological means of society, sometimes I think of statistics personally, because it's very difficult to like you know um, know exactly the information that you're getting and the source you're trusting is actually a central source right from it. But this is also why where I think like AI and robotics, sorry, AI and distributed ledger technologies play a huge role, like pairing together, and where when you think about how statistics are garnered, you could have a much more transparent system behind the proofs of each one of these respectable, in this really thought is like a vote, right? Because statistics are essentially uh, something of a question and an answer about whatever it may be about this particular statistical report that you're looking at, right? Industry specific, sociological specific, geological specific, whatever it may be. And I think thinking about all of us having phones and whatever this information may be, all it really takes is people answering questions and that information respectively being put together by one of these like very very powerful large language model intensive systems, and then being able to have that information represented statistically, and then put immutably on a distributed ledger technology. That is, I think that's the long term future of where we're going, and the power of these technologies being paired together.
Hey, Death, I want to say thank you for having me up. My kid's freaking out right now. I got to get back to him. But I just want to say thank you and great conversation. And I'll be listening and appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Persistence. You come up whenever you want. It's okay.
Appreciate you, brother.
What do you think, Devon?
I wanted to go back to what I was asking you before.
I mentioned statistics and I made vet leave before.
Oh, he doesn't like statistics.
I don't like statistics.
Really? Well, I'll have to pocket that for now. That surprises me. But you see, we got sidetracked. I'll just go back to the question I want to ask you. I think that stable coins will aid in dollar dominance when it comes to the advancement of the XRP ledger. Do you disagree with that? For the next 10 to 50 years.
Can you say that again?
Huh? I can't tell who's on stage. I don't know if I'm talking over somebody. Let me drop.
No, go ahead, Devon. Go ahead.
Earl he just unmuted. What was it you had said though?
I think that stable coins in the XRP ledger in conjunction with it will aid in dollar dominance for the next 10 to 50 years. That is my stance.
Yeah, I think so also.
But with that too, Devon, every stable coin that's used on the XRPL technically would burn or need XRP to be able to function on that ledger. But I like that's a question that's probably one of the 100% things that the stable coins are going to outperform the native tokens on those specific blockchains. But at the same time, a lot of people don't realize that RLUSD on XRPL is using XRP to be able to transition and to transact between one another. So yeah, even if stablecoins outperforms everything else on the XRPL, at the end of the day, you're still going to get the use of XRP being transitional along with the burning mechanism that they have set in place.
I do agree with everything that you just said. But the caveat to give you more context is he thinks that the dollar will not remain the global reserve asset. Fair, Death Ranger?
Reserve, yes.
So, if you have dollar dominance, which you just agreed with my statement for the next 10 to 50 years, the XRP ledger and stablecoins will help dollar dominance over that time period. How in your mind does the US dollar not remain a global reserve asset?
Because people don't hold it as a reserve. They use it as a transactional means. When it's as easy as popping out of whatever you hold your value in, represented in your digital format, the means of the exchange is, right? You have the pretty much instantaneous exchange. So,
definitely. But imagine the power of XRP when it's double-sided in against these stable coins. And then you could it's like when First Ledger came out. If you go and look at the chart of the price of XRP and you see when First Ledger came out and people started to use their cold storage XRP and kind of double-sided into LPs or use it for the on-demand liquidity, which is the whole entire purpose of XRP, you kind of see the value of that. And that's from like a retail side opposed to a institutional side. So then like what Devon's saying, so imagine you have a stable coin of RLUSD and they have a pool that they're going to double side in XRP along with the stablecoin. Just imagine the value of XRP once it's actually going to be used now that the lawsuit's over, with the on-demand liquidity of XRP being double-sided in with that stablecoin to create the proper, like, higher liquidity along with everything else, and just see the benefits of that side.
Shellfish, jump in.
Oh, I was just going to say, if you're worried about the burning of XRP being too fast, doesn't that get eliminated with the batch transactions?
But even the batch transactions, they're able to adjust the trust line set along with the burning fee at any point. They've already done that once when we went up 500%. I think it used to be 10 XRP to open a wallet, and I think now it's one. But I know that the metrics of that, of like the trust lines and everything else, have been adjusted related to the price of XRP. So you can't really use that as a metrics, because at any point that can change related to the price of what XRP is per XRP.
I think she said batch transactions. Is that what you said, Shellfish?
Yeah.
All right, I thought I was going crazy for a second. Yeah, batch transactions are larger transactions, so there will be more XRP per se if there's a lot of them that are occurring. Um, I don't know. I know a lot of people like the fact that it is, in my opinion, important that it is deflationary, but it is very minutely deflationary. It's something along the lines of, I think, like something like 20 Vavillion transactions that'll probably be able to occur on the XRP ledger, which is a number that has a lot of zeros behind it. But I think there is an interesting thought behind the speculative nature, um, when being represented in thought behind something that is useful or potentially very useful for people, especially when the more and more people garner behind it, as you've kind of seen, or as we've seen with things like Bitcoin.
So the reason you don't like statistics is because you can lie with statistics.
How do you know? See, it's not that they can't be helpful or useful in some thought and manner, right? I think though that they get, and they are typically blown out of proportion, and if incorrect, as we've seen, even done by the national statistics, right, for the labor market, how incorrect that they were, right? These things can be, even, on higher levels, possibly be inaccurate by large measures, and so, yeah, I mean, it's, with any report, statistics report, right? Large tests. There are always variables. There are always questions to be had about it, and depends on the documentation that's typically available. If I'm going to make my thoughts and opinion sway on,
So it's
if this
unreliable data then,
information.
basically.
Well, I mean, the thing is it's not necessarily unreliable data. It's just that every single time that you would mention any single statistic, it's like, okay, so let's do the delve into the research of every single statistic, and try to do our best research into garnering as much information about how things were handled, and even down to the employees that handled the tests themselves, and the information that was being um, used as what is the part of that where you get that statistic from. I mean, all these things can play in it, right? When you think about manipulation, it doesn't even necessarily mean that people who say we're taking part in a statistic answered a question one way, and then somebody later changed it and did it another way. I mean, how do you prove these things, right? It's like this of all of these intangibles that propagate inside of something like that. However, throw it into a digital biometrical system where every one of us have devices and phones, and these types of being able to prove systematic functions today, right? Of an execution, throw that proof of source of that execution onto an immutable platform, connect everybody with things like sophisticated systems and interoperable platforms, and you can have application that can execute this proof of source of what could be used as towards a statistic, and you have all this source of information behind it that's able to be proven. The question then comes down to it: do the statistics that we have today, even think about just like global statistics and the all the way down to the local statistics, do they benefit anybody who would see to it that if those statistics weren't that way, they would be in some sort of disproportionate position comparably to where they're
Everybody,
at? I know that's what was that, Devon?
everybody, statistics are trash.
That's where I was going with what I was saying is that like whether batch transactions or not, at the end of the day, as the price accumulates of XRP, those values that the statistics that we've gathered change drastically based on it, right down to the point of them kind of changing their reserves or their transaction fees. So to use that kind of statistics now to be used into the future, it's really, you can't really use that knowing that they can change it at any time, and they will change it as the price goes up.
Are you talking about wallet, like the how much it costs for a wallet and
Yeah,
transaction?
just transactions of the wallet along with the trust lines, along with everything else,
Oh, oh,
down to batch transactions. Like if you're doing 10 batch transactions where you have to open 10 trust lines at X value today. Well, in 6 months from now, that X value may be 1/10 of what it is today. So it's hard to use statistics based on that when the value is being changed, is the whole entire point of what I brought up in the beginning.
yeah, yeah. I hear you there. I hear you there. The plus side to that one, though, at least, and maybe you'll like this, Earl, is that that vote is actually static, and so I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was something like 50%. Maybe it is 80%. No, if Yvette was in here, I would say I think it was 50%. But they could pretty much change that in like 15 minutes. Every flag ledger that could be voted on and changed. So if it needed to be proportionally changed, if something of that magnitude happened, it could be done. But yeah, it's you're still right though. Yeah, very much so.
And it has been done. That's a big thing that I'm bringing up is like we can look at as much statistics as the past as we want at X value of what it costs beforehand. But the fact knowing that exactly what you said, that it can be changed at any time, you almost have to use different kind of numbers and values when you're evaluating whatever you are based on the fact that these values can change at any time is basically all I was trying to get across.
I dislike
Yeah.
statistics.
Tell us why, Devon.
They're easily skewable. You can sway statistics into your favor. It just depends on what your objective goal is, right? And we've seen it time and time again throughout history. But I'll even give you one, right? If you look at the quote unquote metrics of the XRP ledger, uh, it makes no sense for it to be the third biggest by market cap because nobody quote unquote uses the chain, right? Um, and I don't agree with that. That's actually one of the biggest criticisms that people typically have of the XRP ledger, right? Nobody uses it. It's a ghost chain. But it depends on how you look at the metric of usage, right? Because if I am storing my wealth inside of XRP, then that is a use. I'm holding it. That is a usage, right? But that doesn't come up in the statistics often. So I don't like statistics because they don't always paint the full picture.
Exactly it. All of the points are well made on why, right? It's just it's just intangibles, right? And then the thing is that they paint such a powerful picture where it's like this was the determination of these factors, and so absoluteness, which in my opinion, nothing is ever absolute in nature, but yeah. Interesting runoff there.
That goes to Devon saying as well. It's like when we heard Saul and Vet talking about store of value and bringing up US, like the US dollar. It's like the US dollar, yes, it's shrinking in comparison to crypto, but compared to all the other fiat kind of currencies, it's not. It's actually going up compared to all the other ones. So it's all representative to kind of what you're grabbing in your skew to be able to create this data. But again, I fully agree with Devon. It's all based on kind of what you're using or what you're doing. But if you're trying to give value to the US dollar, well, you're just gonna use it against all the other currencies. Whereas if you're trying to shit on the dollar, you're gonna use it against cryptocurrency where it's like completely different, and you're going to get completely different values on what you're trying to do with it. But at the end of the day, out of currencies, the US dollar is number one and always will be number one. And it is, at the end of the day, a store of value. Whether you think it's a good store of value or a bad store of value, at the end of the day, it is a store of value. And a lot of people are holding fiat in their bank accounts, acting like it's a store of value, which in the end we know there's a lot better versions of store of value, but a lot of people don't know that. But at the end of the day, it's not degressing the US dollar from being a store of value. It's just not the best store of value. So it's like it's all comprehensive to what you're trying to do or what you're trying to accomplish within whatever table you're trying to create.
Well, maybe Earl, you have a proportionate answer for this one. So today, the U.S. dollar is the world reserve currency, just as you had said, right? Because people hold it as a reserve. At what point and what percentage? It used to be something like 80% of the world was holding the U.S. dollar as a reserve. Today, it's all the way down to 50%, almost underneath it, possibly. At what percentage do you stop saying, well, it's a world reserve currency? Useful, used still, possibly, but reserve currency.
Yeah, with that one, I believe that it's like slowly shrinking over time because you can see, like, just like you said, it used to be 80, now it's 50. But until something's dominating the US dollar, so actually flips the 50%, then you can say it's no longer the reserve currency. But as of now, if 50% is US dollars and 50% is everything else between everything, then those percentages are so low. But for something to flip the US dollar to become the dominant currency, it's got to have over half the market value, I guess you could say.
Interesting.
Which creates, like you said, it's interesting, yeah, but it creates a bigger thing when you look at it now, where we are at that 50% threshold, where there is a possibility of something kind of over flipping it. But anything that holds 50% value accumulative against everything else, obviously it's still the reserve asset. But if it goes to 40% and 50% is the yen or something, for example, and then that equals 90 and 10% is everything else, then I think at that point you could say that it's flipped. So it's still very dominant to think that 40% or 50% of the world is US dollars, and then the other 50% is all the other currencies combined. But if there's one currency that can kind of flip US dollars by itself without being accumulated into everything else, then I think that's when we see the threshold change from US dominance into something else. But I also don't see that happening for the distant future, because even stable coins, you look at stable coins and they're backed by treasury bills and everything else. It's like it's still the US dollar. It's just a kind of electronic version of it. But if you honestly go and look back in time, like even the US dollar has already been electronically kind of submitted. Like if you go and buy anything, almost 90% of goods these days are paid with debit cards, which are just basically kind of that electronic dollar dominance online. Like it's not cash. Very few people these days are using cash to buy things.
I also love that you brought up the U.S. Treasury there. In a world where people buy treasuries and issue stable coins, what role does the Fed need to play?
But I personally believe that the Fed is gonna be gone, just the way that everything has kind of been going, and the way that kind of everything's been laid out by Trump is that one day the Fed will not be needed just for the sole purpose of having AI and everything else integrated within their systems. And yeah, and then even down to where Donald Trump talks about like how America is going to be the crypto of the world. You got to kind of look at how is that even possible, and then a lot of things just kind of stem back to XRP and the close connection that Brad Garlinghouse and David have to the White House right now, and just how we see in North America how crypto and XRP is being integrated on the North American side, but we also have to look at the fact that every other nation and country is far ahead on the crypto side of this, and we've been kind of fumbling the ball all along. So you have to look at those countries and kind of see how they're dealing with these layer one assets opposed to what we're doing in North America, because we are far behind what should be kind of taken within crypto.
What do you think, Devon?
Sorry, I had a call that came in. I was trying to catch up.
It's okay, I figured. In a world where people can just purchase, and institutions can just purchase US treasuries and issue stablecoins, what role does the Fed need to play?
Repeat that.
In a world where people or institutions can purchase US treasuries and issue their stablecoins, what role does the Fed need to play?
I don't see that reality that you just mapped out.
But
It's
isn't
already
that,
happening.
yeah, yeah. I was
I
just
don't
gonna
think that
say,
people are institutions. I don't think
every
that.
every RLUSD that's printed is backed by Treasury bills right now. So you can't say that it's like inevitably gonna it's already happening. Like every dollar printed on RLUSD, which is a digital R like currency for USD, it's already happening where they're using Treasury bills and everything else to back it.
But he said in a world where people are issuing.
Institutions are people. They're just entities of people.
I don't. I can't agree with that one because I can't issue a stable coin as a
I
person.
mean, yeah, but
Good if
you could easily create
No,
a
no, no.
meme
Only,
coin.
only,
No,
only by law, only certain institutions and or conglomerates can issue stable coins.
well, maybe you're not the people that I mentioned when I said people, Devon. That's okay.
Okay, fair
But
enough.
you could be those people. Don't cut yourself short.
But when you
Well,
said people, there's a connotation that comes with the term people. It's really referring to retail. Well,
Yeah, they're just the users of the product.
what if you gave them the power to verify the minting process? Because each state used to have mints when you would mint out actual fiat dollars and coins. What if they were somehow integrated in with that, with the Federated Byzantine Consensus, right? To show that they were verified actual currency within the system.
Of course, this is why credentials is so important, right? So take something like, your permission domains and your credentials, and so you can have this open source network, right? But you can still have this privatized transaction and information and liquidity flow that can occur. Right, Devon?
can you hear me now?
We hear you.
Man, I used to love going to the mint when I was a kid. I don't know if anybody else got an opportunity to do that because I think they stopped doing that back in like the late 90s or something like that. I remember visiting the Denver Mint though. It was really a cool opportunity.
yeah, they didn't let anyone else go because there's no gold left there.
Go ahead, Devam. Did we lose? Did we lose him again?
Yeah, I see him as listener.
Well, he's a speaker on my audience, but the thing is, he's probably not there.
So that adds an interesting element if Brad Garlinghouse and Charles Hoskins has been meeting with the Federal Reserve and a few others. Well, what implications does that mean in the matter? Like, are they discussing this in fact scenario?
Well,
Plausible deniability, shellfish.
I've been in a space with Charles, and he's literally mentioned how Apple and Samsung both have a system out for an update to allow kind of DeFi and crypto wallets to be installed within Apple and Samsung, or Google, I guess you would say, is the thing of Samsung. And they're just waiting for law around it to be able to upload this file. And basically everybody from me to you to nobody who knows crypto is going to have some kind of integrated crypto wallet put into their systems within Apple Pay and everything else, all within just an update on iOS or Samsung. And Charles Hawkinson mentioned this about 3 or 6 months ago, and the only thing that they're waiting for is law around it to be able to do it.
Yeah, they'll say law, but they're really just waiting for the perfect time to mark it in, right? And get it in. They got to make sure it's profitable before they
But
can
at the
do it.
end of the day, I think it is law because a lot of banks they don't take on the third like counterparty risk unless it's like third party between somebody taking a loan, opposed to them dealing with law straight on, which is the whole purpose about XRP and everything else as to why they haven't gone to take on a bunch of it is the whole purpose of the counterparty risk that banks aren't willing to take related to themselves, whereas third party risk of loans and everything else. They're used to doing that, so they have no problem doing that. But the biggest thing I think, what I've been told, is for the sole purpose of them taking on the full risk related to the laws and regulations. So until they're actually set in place, that no banks or institution is going to want to take on that risk until they have legal clarity about what they're willing to kind of use or deal with.
Yeah, so you're saying taking custody of users' funds, like you depositing your XRP into Apple Pay, and at that moment in time, Apple now has ownership over your XRP, but you can go and spend your XRP. Is really what you're saying.
Exactly, but at the end of the day, the companies themselves don't want to hold that XRP because of the lawsuit that was happening. Now it's been lifted, obviously, like 3 weeks ago or whatever. But at the same time, it's still, yeah, it's still different. But yeah, exactly what you're saying is that they don't want to hold other people's XRP with relation to XRP possibly not being within the scope of law, I guess. But now that it's been, um,
It's really, what, and it usually comes down to insurance, right? Because there's no defined definitions in the law which allows them to say go out and get an insurance policy on this particular thing that is XRP or Bitcoin or whatever it is. It's, yeah, like you had mentioned, it's very risky still at that moment in time. Correct. I agree. Yeah.
Exactly, and that's just for now. Obviously, that's been overturned, even down to Ripple selling the XRP the way that they were. At the end of the day, everything's been kind of turned around, and now that everything is over, even though they paid that penalty, they're actually able to sell it exactly how they were before when they were brought under the lawsuit. So at the end of the day, the lawsuit did nothing more than kind of create law around crypto and the way that it's working for the sole reason why Ripple is allowed to go and do exactly what they were claimed to do that was wrong, that they paid this penalty for. But with that penalty that they paid, they're allowed to continue to do exactly what was paid for that penalty and just continue on as if nothing happened. So if you honestly look at the broad side of things, the lawsuit did absolutely nothing but stall kind of the growth of XRP if you look at it, because for the sole purpose of them paying that penalty and then being allowed to do the exact thing that caused the penalty just kind of voids the whole entire point of the lawsuit if you look at it on a bigger scale.
Yeah.
And with that as well, like Ripple was able to create crypto laws related to crypto through this lawsuit, which is like if you look back 4 years ago in the SEC, they went after the one crypto company that had a company behind it, and the company battled it, and they paid like 250 or however million they paid to battle it. But what like if you look back, like what did that create? Well, it created law around cryptocurrency, which was never a thing before, that obviously became a thing based on that Ripple case.
Are you referencing library?
I'm just referencing the XRP lawsuit in general and like how everything came of it. And then in the end, they're just allowing them to do exactly what they paid this penalty for, which is like, it just completely, like, there's no point of the lawsuit. Like the last 4 years has been redundant in a way for the sole purpose of they're allowed to go and continue to do exactly what they were sued for originally. They paid a penalty for it, yeah, but now they're like okay to deal that XRP in that exact same manner with no penalty going forward.
Incredible how much just one administration change can do, right, Devon?
Yes.
But that too just kind of points more towards the fact that they were creating law around it. And like people shitting on Ripple and everything else about the escrow they hold and everything. It's like literally bullish as hell knowing that Ripple created the rules and regulations around crypto, and just a lot of different chains don't realize this or don't see it, and they just think that it's like FUD against XRP. But in the end, like Ripple is right there front and center at all times, doing the law, building the law, fighting the law, and trying to collaborate all the different chains together to create a proper kind of crypto market that's going to be able to bring us through the threshold of regular fiat dollars. And it's not just based on cross-border payments, it's everything in general, which is the whole purpose why Brad Garlinghouse has mentioned multiple times about the cross-chain and having everybody interoperable to be able to make this system work. It's way more than just Ripple.
I probably wouldn't go around saying that though, Earl.
Well, that's just the way. If you honestly, if you take your microscope zoomed in on Ripple and then you zoom out, that's literally the only outcome that you really come with that makes any kind of sense related to the 4 year lawsuit that just ended with Ripple paying a payment that they had to pay and then being able to do exactly what they were originally sued for. It's the only kind of answer to it.
I'm glitching. Can anybody hear me?
We hear you, Devon. We hear you. Do you hear us, Devon? We're closing in on that last 10, 15 minutes or so. Please, anybody feel free to come up and join the end of the conversation here. It's been as all of the spaces I get to have and enjoy conversations with everybody in here always are great. Um, and I've enjoyed this topics, but I think I think we got a little bit more room if anybody has any questions or things they'd like to bring up in between.
Death Ranger?
Devon,
Hey.
hey,
So,
How you
can I
doing?
just cook with you for a second? Huh?
I
I
said
said,
how
what are you
Go ahead.
I
doing?
said how you doing?
How
How
you
you
doing?
doing?
Sorry.
I'm doing all right.
What were you going to say, Devon?
I don't remember.
Nice.
Fucking Devon. Devon, do you believe that the Ripple lawsuit was originally done to create law around cryptocurrency?
To create, no, no, I don't believe that at all.
But then
You
you,
believe that?
well, yeah, but you look at the crypto task force and you see a lot of Ripple representatives on it. And then you look back at the lawsuit and they paid the $150 million fine, but then they were also cleared by the courts to do the exact thing that gave them that $150,000 kind of payment that they needed to make, but now they're okay to do it at zero penalty. So how is that not creating law? Like, what did the Ripple case do then?
I think the lawsuit was 125 million.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yes, Devon, we hear you. Yeah.
So I would say to your point, Earl, correlation does not imply causation. Um, those things are correlated, but we can't necessarily say that they are the cause. If I
But
am Ripple, because I could easily retort to you by saying Ripple hired people that would be able to influence a penalty or a lighter penalty because they knew that they were being sued by the government. That would also be a logical response. It's not that it was pre-set up. Ripple got people that would probably be within high positions of power to help ease the penalty if there were to be one on their behalf.
yeah, but then you look at the lawsuit originally, and if you think of the SEC side where they've never kind of battled anybody related to crypto before, are they going to go after the most reputable company to create law, or are they going to go after a company that's fully scammy just to do it? And it almost seems like since then it's honestly to create law, because now we're seeing law created around at the same time that the XRP lawsuit was dropped. And at the same time, it's one thing for the court to say, yeah, you owe this $125 million penalty, and you're no longer able to kind of sell things related to the way that you were because it related to this penalty. But now they're basically saying you pay this penalty and you can just keep continuing selling exactly like you were related to this penalty. It just doesn't really make sense.
A change of
Okay,
administration, change of direction from chairman specifically. Sorry, Devon, go ahead.
no, I was just going to continue to play devil's advocate with you. So let's go back to the time that Ripple was sued. Um, if you believe that there was some sort of pre-planning, who pre-planned it? Were there conglomerates that came together to be adversarial to Ripple? And if there were people that were adversarial to Ripple, isn't it easy to assume that Ripple would have been the only ones? If we are going with this pre-planned thing, they would have been the only ones that you could target because Ethereum and Bitcoin has some sort of alliance in the background with each other.
Well, I think they're designed differently from the get-go, but then you also look at Donald Trump losing presidency to Joe Biden the way that he did, and knowing that it was like kind of infiltrated by newcomers that arrived that were able to vote and everything else. It's almost like it was just stalled for the 4 years while Trump lost to have him reinstated, and then you almost see instantly the power of Donald Trump working with these people to kind of just continue on the plan that he had from 4 years ago.
You have to know that I'm not going to agree with that, right?
But I would love to hear the opposite side of that. I've been dying for that. I've had my kind of conviction play, but I'd love to hear the other side of that as to why this lawsuit ever happened, knowing that at the end of the day they're allowed to like, I just can't get over the fact that they're allowed to continue to do the same thing that they did, and the penalty that they have to pay, they can just use the XRP that they have in escrow to pay it. So at the end of the day, who's really, there's nobody at fault, I guess you can say, because they're allowed to continue to do what they paid the penalty for. and they were just able to use the XRP that they had in escrow, which essentially cost $0 to pay, to pay the penalty for this. And then you see Donald Trump so closely tied to kind of what Ripple's doing all throughout, and then just the, I guess, staple of what XRP has within the crypto community. Like at the end of the day, there is one major company that's working for crypto, and that is XRP. Or sorry, that is Ripple at the end of the day. And there's no other really kind of challenging companies at this time that can kind of throw them off in the sense.
Okay, so it's a lot going on there to unpack. It, Jeffrey, how long are you running the space?
We got like 5-6 minutes, Devon. You got all right.
Okay, let's try to get this done in 5 or 6 minutes. Okay. Um, Fuck, so many claims in that one thing, Earl. You hit me with a lot. Why not Cardano? You said that Ripple was the only one that they could have attacked. Why couldn't Cardano be right there with it?
Well,
Or Binance.
I personally believe
By
that
the way, Binance was sued by the SEC as well.
yeah, but I personally believe that the SEC went after the most reputable company, which is what I was saying with XRP and Ripple, and just the staple that they've had, even down to RLUSD, to get New York, whatever exchange, that it's like one of the hardest places to get within it. They went to them first and reached out to them and got passed by them. My main thing is like Ripple was probably in the top three companies that were compliant, and the SEC decided to go after them related to this, which to me fully turns to creating law, especially with the answers that were given, is kind of where I'm going with this. And then at the end of the day, it's one thing if Ripple paid the penalty and they were no longer able to sell in that instance, but the fact that they paid a penalty and were able to just continue to sell the XRP in the exact same way that they were penalized for, it just, to me, it makes zero sense.
Also, why not Cardano and why Ripple? Well, Ripple was the bigger threat in the big game, right? Like, then I mean, Cardano really wasn't as established as Ripple was at the time.
And that's where my brain goes to. They went to the most established, reputable company to create the law around cryptocurrency, and then you see the lawsuit ending, and then you see the laws going through Congress at the exact same time. It's all like they're not going to go after. They literally use the most reputable company to create law around cryptocurrency, in my mind, to be honest. And that's maybe why they didn't choose Cardano, is because XRP was above them. But it's very weird to hold a lawsuit over one of the top crypto companies in the world for so long, and then just end the lawsuit by giving them a fine and then allowing them to do exactly what they were doing beforehand. That to me makes zero sense.
Yeah, but Earl, if you go back, do you remember how they talked about how in the Reddit forums people were getting seen to go against Ripple and XRP, and we know that I think David Schwartz had actually said that when they were forming the ledger and XRP, that it was basically like Bitcoin 2.0. It had no ties to like the energy issues. There was just so many superior things compared to Bitcoin. So it really was the bigger threat. So it was the
Wait,
competition. It was flat out the competition, like to
exactly,
go after them.
which makes the perfect reason for them to go after them, and then hold out the 4-year lawsuit that just ended up in them paying a fine and being able to do the same thing that they're doing, but by going after. And Bitcoin doesn't have a
Is
company
it
that
just
you could
me, or
just.
does this keep going out?
It's just you, Devon.
But yeah, that just strengthens my reasoning as to why they went after Ripple.
And
Because
Earl,
like
stop speaking.
Bitcoin, you could say whatever you want about Bitcoin, but it doesn't have a company that can represent it. So the actual number one currency at the time that the SEC went after Ripple, they were the number one crypto company on the planet. And the reason why you'd go after them, especially knowing that you have no law around it in a court, is to create law. And at the end of the day, They created this lawsuit. They made them pay this fine, which Ripple just used. Honestly, you
Well,
could say
and
fake XRP.
you
Like, it didn't
Euro,
cost them $1.
you could not sue BTC because there was no CEO, there was nobody
And
to go after. It was so
exactly.
decentralized, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly what I'm saying. Is like they couldn't go after BTC. They couldn't really go after. I guess they could after ETH for a reason, but literally the main crypto company, like I'm saying, the company, not the native asset, but the company was Ripple 4 years ago, and then they went through this whole entire lawsuit just to come to the resolution that they have to pay this penalty, but then they can just continue to sell it without that penalty in like, yeah, it's very weird. It's one thing to say you can't sell it that way, it was sold wrong and you have to do this differently, but the sole purpose that they just allowed them to continue to sell just based on paying a penalty, which they know that they just use this fake XRP to, or not fake XRP, but the or the XRP that they accumulated for $0 to pay this penalty, and they're just allowed to continue to kind of do exactly what they were scrutinized for 4 years ago. To me, it finds very weird, and it's almost like the SEC went after the top crypto company that was available to create law around cryptocurrency. And then you see now the laws of cryptocurrency are going through Congress and they're being passed throughout it. Meanwhile, Ripple pays this penalty and they're able to just continue to sell in the same way that this penalty was accumulated. It just doesn't make sense other than creating law around cryptocurrency.
Well, I mean, cases set precedent. Laws set by Congress. Precedent is powerful without law. Obviously, saying an opposing uh, view of what may be set as precedent. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to say exactly why everything played out. Maybe they wanted money. Maybe the SEC saw an opportunity to make money. They did make $125 million.
Yeah, but
It's not that much.
if you look back, you got to look at how much money the SEC's paid to fight this as well. But it's exactly
Probably.
what I turned to you to. Is like the whole purpose of suing Ripple was they were number one crypto company in the world, and they used it to create law. It's like you look at it now, the SEC lawsuit is just finishing, and now law is going through Congress. So how do you not correlate that the Ripple lawsuit created the law around cryptocurrency? Even if you look at like the cryptocurrency board against like negative thing, like half of the Ripple board is on that cryptocurrency task force, I guess you could say. But then again, like everything turns back to the fact that they paid this penalty for this transaction that they were doing beforehand, but now they've been given full rights to continue to sell XRP in that exact fashion related to the penalty they paid. That's where I just can't wrap my head around. It's not creating the law.
What do you think, Devon? Before we wrap up, interesting place we laid.
I don't. I don't personally accept the notion that Ripple was targeted. I don't think that any company wants to be targeted in order to proceed. Right? No company wants to spend $200 million, especially at a time when Ripple $200 million would have been very pivotal to Ripple's growth and acceleration throughout the market. So I don't accept that notion.
No, but
Do I agree with?
I'm not saying Ripple wanted it to happen. I'm saying the SEC went after Ripple because they were the number one company in crypto. And the only, like, you look at law, you go back 1,000 years. The only way to create law is against the best case against it. But if you have the SEC 4 years ago, they're not going to go after 98th ranked cryptocurrency and try and create law around it. They're going to go after the best company and create law against the way that they're doing it because they're the most compliant with regulations and stuff. That's where my head just keeps going.
How do you feel about them suing R-
But
Richard Hart?
they also sued a lot of different places. But then you look at like the drops and you look at how many cryptocurrency kind of lawsuits were dropped before the Ripple case. It's like the Ripple case was the first one to end and the first one to start and the last one to end, and everything in between just kind of got bypassed along the way. And if you look at like a lot of the cryptocurrency suing that they've had within the SEC that they just dropped and just didn't give a shit about, and then in the end, like they cared about Ripple so much that it was like one of the last ones to kind of be resolved. And in the end of the day, it was resolved, but at the same time, it's resolved with a fee and allowing them to continue doing exactly what they were doing beforehand. How is that? How can you even justify making them pay if you're allowing them to continue exactly what they were doing with what fee they paid?
Because the decision to pay is made by the judge, not the SEC. And so the SEC, and you know, we saw this right at the end of the lawsuit, right? The SEC essentially tried to say, "Oh, no, 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 we didn't really mean to sue Ripple, right? Like we should drop this." And the judge said, "No, you've wasted my time. This is the final ruling. You pay a fine. This is that."
But
This
even that's
so you
weird.
know
That almost just points to the fact that the judges wanted their salaries covered on like a government side, so that their good their shit is covered and that they get the yeah. I don't know. That makes it even weirder, man. I truly agree.
yes.
It's one
So
thing
wait,
to sue
Earl,
people and make yeah.
if you scan back like or scale back for as a system engineer, right? Like seeing the magnitude of what was coming down the pipeline with AI, with supply chain, with all of this stuff, the infrastructure itself having to be rebuilt to accommodate not just the financial system, but the AI that was obviously growing at an exponential rate. You have to see where we are with the grid being rebuilt for Bitcoin, because we see Bitcoin consumption for each one taking what was it the entire amount that a city requires, and then AI using that as on a compounded level. So you have that, you know that, and I'm not even somebody that is working at like Harvard, MIT, like seeing the scale that this is going to be at, but each like so take Wall Street. Wall Street now needs a massive data center, a nuclear power plant to run the supercomputer that will house the AI. Like, and this is globally that has to like go into effect, because it's not just us. We have China, we have Russia, we have Korea, Singapore, like all of the countries all have to get on board. So that's where you have the World Economic Forum coming in going, holy crap, we have to like scale this out. And we have so much time to do it because it's growing at an exponential rate. And they kind of knew the timeline, maybe not to the day, but they knew it was coming. So you have Bitcoin, which is actually like finding its purpose in building out the grid, because it is a proof of work power, I don't know, consumer. So people were already starting to utilize it, because it was basically testing out the grid in like a stress test, you could say, because more and more people were utilizing it to mine Bitcoin because of its energy consumption, right? So now they're like, okay, we're doing okay with this, but we know AI is going to use it so much more, and it's only able to handle this. But down the line, we're not going to need that. Maybe if we have stuff that's pre-mined, like XRP. So
But but but
yeah,
imagine Bitcoin was put in place and they used Bitcoin to be able to lay the infrastructure for global finance to be able to be used everywhere. Which is like I've seen a deep rabbit hole that the whole entire purpose of Bitcoin was to lay the kind of infrastructure for global finance to be used. And exactly like you said, Bitcoin, a lot of miners moved to third world countries in different places where it's very cheap, but they also didn't have the energy sector that they have now. So by having
correct.
Bitcoin over the last 10 years, it's laid the infrastructure to be able to use global finance everywhere. So it's like that again ties back to XRP, which again ties back to the rules, laws, and regulations, which again ties back to the sole purpose of the SEC going after Ripple because they're the most reputable crypto company on the planet, which then creates the law around what's happening, which then puts Brad Garlinghouse and Stu on the crypto board for regulations related to what's happening. Like what you're saying just ties into everything that I'm saying, which kind of points to the whole purpose that Ripple was sued to create law around cryptocurrency, and that the Bitcoin was laid for the infrastructure to create the infrastructure to be able to use globally. Because you don't have third world countries having these kind of energy systems. And the whole purpose of Bitcoin was to move to these third world countries, which create cheaper energy and create the infrastructure to put into place to roll
and
out
it
a
le-
global system.
and it levels them up, because
E-
now not only do they have
exactly.
access to the power grid that is now up to par with everybody else's, but they have access to the digital currency. They have access to AI that's going to improve all of
What
their living, right?
Yeah, 1000%. Right down to these third world countries creating the cheapest energy. So Bitcoin going there and creating energy there. Well, the energy created there now can be put on the grid for global finance, which is the whole entire point of this entire thing with cryptocurrency.
Damn it, Bitcoin is love.
And that's where my everything stems to is like I never knew about Bitcoin or what the whole purpose of it is, knowing that you have like pre-mined tokens somewhere else that cost less energy. But then when I found out that they're all branching out to these third world countries that don't have energy, and that it's like an incentive to create energy there, all Bitcoin was a layer to create kind of interoperability between all of global chains together to use the pre-mine shit eventually once all the infrastructure's set to be able to do it. And then you look at the SEC attacking Ripple as hard as they did over everybody else, and it's literally used to create the law around cryptocurrency, which Bitcoin used to create the infrastructure around cryptocurrency. So everything is kind of intertwined to begin with. But if you kind of look back and then intertwine in your brain everything that's going on and connect it together, that's just where I've come to, and nobody's kind of been able to debunk the factor of the whole reason. Like, you got to think 4 years ago. Don't think about today. Think about 4 years ago and why the SEC went after Ripple the way that they did. That's the part that gets me. And then I heard it from Bitcoiners, and I never knew why Bitcoin was so efficient or the purpose of it until I found out that it's like funding third world countries that don't have power to create power to get wealth out of this. But at the end of the day, all it's doing is creating global electricity between everywhere to be able to adopt this global currency that's coming.
Ooh, well, that is quite a theory there. With that though, I'm going to close up. We went a little bit past what I wanted to keep it open. Sorry, I see you down there, Tim. Maybe I'll catch you in the space a little bit later on. Yeah, thank you everybody. Thank you guys for coming to the space today. Love you. I love you guys. I hope everybody has a great rest of the night, and we'll be back. Night, everybody.